A better version. Same power, no hate. What really happens during a midlife identity collapse? Something happens to people in midlife that nobody wants to talk about. One day, life feels structured, predictable, meaningful. Responsibilities make sense. Roles are clear. And then one day, they don't. Not because life suddenly got worse, but because the identity they built their self-worth on starts to crack. This isn't about cheating, it isn't about morality, and it isn't about men versus women. It's about what happens when a person's value system was built on something temporary and time takes it away. For some, it was youth. For some, it was attractiveness. For others, productivity, status, or being needed. When that pillar collapses, the mind panics, and panic makes people destroy things they once loved. The core psychological truth. Humans don't collapse because they're evil. They collapse because their identity no longer works. If someone spent decades being the attractive one, the desired one, the successful one, the needed one, and suddenly that role fades, the brain interprets it as existential threat. Neuroscience shows that when identity is threatened, the brain activates the same circuits as physical danger. That's why midlife crises feel irrational. They're not logical, they're neurological. Why validation becomes addictive in midlife? Dopamine doesn't respond the same way at 40 as it did at 25. What once felt rewarding now feels neutral. Routine love feels quiet. Stability feels invisible. Predictability stops producing chemical reward. So the brain goes searching. Not for love, not for meaning, for intensity. Novel attention releases dopamine faster than commitment ever could. New validation hits harder than long-term loyalty. That's not romance, that's chemistry. And chemistry doesn't care about consequences. Why people rewrite history when they leave. This is one of the darkest psychological mechanisms, narrative reconstruction. When someone makes a choice that violates their values, the brain rewrites the past to reduce guilt. Suddenly, the relationship was never good. The partner was always controlling. The happiness was pretend. Not because it's true, but because the mind needs the person to be the hero, not the destroyer. This happens across genders, across cultures, across personality types. It's not cruelty, it's self-protection. The real danger zone in long-term relationships. The danger isn't age, it's identity dependency. Any person, man or woman, who bases self-worth on being desired, being admired, being special, being needed, is vulnerable when those conditions change, and life always changes them. If meaning was never built internally, panic will eventually take over. What actually protects relationships? Not control, not obsession, not fear, but identity beyond validation, purpose beyond attention, meaning beyond excitement. People who survive midlife don't chase youth. They grieve it, then evolve. They shift from dopamine to meaning, attention to contribution, novelty to depth. And that transition is hard, painful, uncomfortable. But it's the difference between growth and destruction. The hard truth. Midlife doesn't destroy people. It reveals what their identity was built on. If it was built on surface, the collapse is dramatic. If it was built on depth, the transition is quiet. And that's the real warning nobody talks about. And here's the part nobody ever prepares you for. After the explosion, after the dust settles, after the shock wears off and the lawyers stop calling and the house feels too quiet. Because everyone talks about the moment she leaves, no one talks about what comes after she finds herself. At first, she feels powerful, liberated, desired again. New photos, new angles, new smiles she hasn't practiced in years. People tell her she looks happy, stronger, younger. She believes it too, because belief is easy when dopamine is flooding the system. But chemistry always runs out. The messages slow down, the compliments get repetitive. The men who chased her don't stay. They never plan to. Because here's the cruel truth she wasn't warned about. Men who pursue married women over 40 are not building a future. They're borrowing an experience. They wanted the thrill, not the responsibility, the fantasy, not the reality, the validation of "I still got it," not the woman who needs reassurance every morning. And slowly, quietly, something starts to crack. She realizes she didn't escape a cage. She stepped into a colder room. The nights feel longer now. The silence, louder. The phone that once buzzed constantly now sits face down, untouched. And that's when the panic returns. But this time it's worse. Because now there's no husband to blame, no marriage to villainize, no structure to hide behind. Just her and time. This is the stage nobody films TikToks about. No empowerment quotes for this phase, no applause. Just the slow realization that the excitement she chased was never meant to last, and the life she burned was. And this is where the psychology turns vicious. Because instead of admitting regret, the mind doubles down. She tells herself, "I had to do it. It was necessary. I would have died inside if I stayed." Not because it's true, but because the alternative is unbearable. To admit she destroyed something real for something temporary would shatter her completely. So she rewrites history again, harder this time. Now the marriage wasn't just unhappy, it was toxic. Now the husband wasn't just imperfect, he was emotionally abusive. Now the kids weren't hurt, they were resilient. The story must hold, because if it collapses, she collapses with it. Meanwhile, the man she left behind is going through something very different. He doesn't get validation. He doesn't get applause. He gets silence. He wakes up in a house that still smells like her shampoo. He sits at a dinner table built for 4 and eats alone. He answers questions from children he doesn't know how to explain. And unlike her, he doesn't get encouraged to find himself. He's told to man up, be strong, move on. So he does what men always do. He internalizes it. He replays every moment, every argument, every missed signal. He wonders how a life can vanish while he was busy maintaining it. And here's the irony nobody talks about. This crisis doesn't make men reckless. It makes them precise. Men age into realism. Women age into urgency. He learns from the wreckage. She tries to outrun it. And eventually, sometimes years later, the paths cross again. Not physically, psychologically. She sees him stable, grounded, still respected by his children, still standing. And that's when something ugly appears. Not love, not desire, envy. Because he survived the fire she lit. Because he rebuilt without destroying others. Because time didn't take from him what time took from her. And that's the final twist of the knife. The realization that the man she left behind became stronger, while the life she chased dissolved into fragments. This isn't punishment. It's consequence. Not moral. Biological. Psychological. Because here's the truth buried under all the noise. A woman who builds her identity on attention will always panic when attention fades. A woman who builds her identity on meaning does not. One collapses when youth leaves. The other evolves. And modern culture overwhelmingly teaches women the first path. Chase desire. Follow feelings. Burn bridges. You can always rebuild. What they don't teach is this. Some bridges only exist once. Some families don't heal. Some children never forget. And some men never open their hearts again. Not because they hate women, but because they've seen how fragile love becomes when biology takes the wheel. This isn't blaming women. It's telling the truth nobody profits from. Aging is not the enemy. Denial is. Time isn't cruel. Running from it is. And the tragedy isn't that women change at 40. The tragedy is that so many were never taught how to change without destroying everything behind them.